Welcome to part 7 of our guide to interpreting CEESAT reliability criteria for use in CEEDER, the CE database of evidence reviews. My name is Andrew Pullin and I'm presenting this series of short videos. In part 7, I will be covering the interpretation of Criterion 7, data synthesis. The criteria in this section are a little different as they not only consider how data synthesis was conducted and reported by the authors, but also what limitations were imposed by the available primary data. The first criterion asks if the choice of synthesis approach is appropriate. Ideally, the data included in the review will be sufficient for quantitative synthesis and statistical analysis, often some form of meta-analysis. But this may not be possible if few studies are eligible or the diversity of studies means such a synthesis is not appropriate. For example, studies may be so diverse that there is no valid reason to expect the outcome to be the same. Also, if outcomes are measured in diverse ways, then it may not be valid to try and combine them. In these cases, a narrative synthesis only may be provided, together with descriptive statistics. These factors are largely outside of the control of the review authors, and so appropriate approaches to synthesis are really what matters. But quantitative synthesis is preferable if it's possible, as it's more powerful and less prone to bias than descriptive narrative synthesis. What is problematic from the point of view of review conduct is lack of rigorous synthesis when it would have been possible, or any attempt to provide a direction or measure of effect using unsuitable or flawed methods, for example vote counting, the counting of individual studies with positive and negative outcomes without any consideration of their comparative validity. There is no attempt to judge the merits of the chosen meta-analysis method in this criterion, but as in other review steps, it is important that the method is fully reported so that the synthesis could be repeated by a third party. So for 7.1, gold is awarded if the choice of synthesis method is pre-specified in a protocol, described in sufficient detail to be replicable and justified on the basis of scoping of included studies. Or it may also be justified post hoc as a deviation from the protocol. And where a quantitative and statistical approach to meta-analysis is not employed when it may have been appropriate, a justification for this should be given. Green is awarded when the choice of synthesis method is not pre-specified, but is described post hoc in sufficient detail to be replicable and appears justified on the basis of characteristics of included studies. And as in gold, where quantitative and statistical approaches to meta-analysis are not employed, when it may have been appropriate, a justification for this should be given. Amber is awarded when either or both of the green criteria are not met, but none of the listed criteria under red below apply. Red is awarded if either or both in green above are not met and either quantitative synthesis is undertaken when inappropriate or vote counting relied on as an indicator of impact or effectiveness, or synthesis does not include all studies, or if it is unclear if it includes all studies. Where possible, to reduce risk of bias, statistical estimates of findings should be presented using a predefined meta-analysis method that includes consideration of study independence, for example through sensitivity analysis, and publication bias through the use of an appropriate test. So for 7.2, gold is awarded if statistical estimates of findings are presented using a predefined method that justifies the synthesis approach, and consideration is given to study independence and publication bias. Green is awarded when the above criteria are met, except that the synthesis method is not predefined in a protocol. Amber is awarded if statistical estimates of findings are presented using a defined method, but lacks full justification of the approach and/or consideration of study independence and/or publication bias. Red is awarded if no statistical estimate of findings is provided, either because meta-analysis is not conducted or not possible, or if a statistical estimate of findings is provided, but it is not clear what meta-analysis method was used. Criterion 7.3 looks at heterogeneity in primary study findings. Eligible studies can differ in their results, often referred to as heterogeneity, which may be due to chance, but could also reflect the influence of variables other than the factor of interest, often referred to as effect modifiers or confounding factors. The presence and magnitude of effect modifiers can reveal important information about a system. Investigating heterogeneity therefore indicates the degree to which effects are generalizable across studies and is necessary to evaluate the appropriateness of combining studies conducted on different populations or reporting different outcome metrics. Effect modifiers can be investigated statistically in meta-analysis through subgroup analyses, sensitivity analyses, and meta-regression. Additionally, the influence of study validity as an effect modifier should be investigated, usually by sensitivity analysis, for example, the sensitivity of the estimate of mean effect to the inclusion or exclusion of lower validity studies. So for 7.3, gold is awarded if a strategy for investigating effect modifiers is provided in an a priori protocol and followed in the review unless variations are explained and justified. And effect modifiers were investigated statistically through meta-analysis unless evidence for heterogeneity between studies has been tested and reported as non-significant. And authors have investigated the impact of critical appraisal of study validity in their quantitative and/or their narrative synthesis. Green is awarded if the same criteria as gold are met, except the strategy is not provided in a protocol. Amber is awarded if effect modifiers are investigated statistically through meta-analysis, but authors have not used results of critical appraisal in their quantitative or narrative synthesis, and/or effect modifiers were only investigated descriptively through narrative synthesis. Red is awarded if reasons for variability in study findings are not investigated. Effect modifiers were not considered, and this includes studies that use quantitative synthesis but fail to test for heterogeneity statistically. Thanks for listening to this presentation. I hope it was helpful in gaining an understanding of the importance of transparency of the synthesis method to inform your decision making. If you have any questions or feedback, please use this email or visit the CEEDER website.